2019 Digital Hiking Journal. So, properties of air. Air has mass. To prove it has mass, you can weigh a balloon before and after blowing it up. Air takes up space. To prove that air takes up space, get a balloon and blow it up. The balloon is bigger than before because the air in it is taking up space. Air has pressure. To prove it has pressure, you can cut a small hole in an empty juice bottle and put a balloon over the lid. If you suck up the air from the hole in the bottle with your mouth, the balloon will blow up. If you cover the hole after sucking the air from the bottle, the balloon will still be blown up because the pressure in the room was greater than the pressure in the bottle. Also, air pressure decreases as you increase in altitude. Air moves from high pressure to low pressure. Atmosphere. The atmosphere are the gases that make up the Earth. The gases are 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% other trace gases. The atmosphere has 4 layers. The troposphere. The bottom layer of the atmosphere is the troposphere. The troposphere is where we live and weather happens. The next layer is the stratosphere. The stratosphere contains the ozone layer. The ozone layer protects us from powerful UV rays. The next layer make up the Earth. There are 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% other trace gases. The atmosphere has 4 layers. They are the troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, and thermosphere. The troposphere is where weather happens. The stratosphere contains ozone gas to protect Earth from powerful UV rays. The next is the mesosphere. The mesosphere burns up meteors to protect Earth, and the thermosphere. The thermosphere is broken into the ionosphere and exosphere. The ionosphere causes the northern lights, and the exosphere is where the satellites are. Next layer is the hydrosphere. The hydrosphere is where the water is that fills 71% of the Earth. The water in the hydrosphere is distributed among ocean, rivers, lakes, glaciers, ice caps, groundwater, and surface water. Another sphere of the Earth is the cryosphere. The cryosphere is water in its solid form, made where the low temperatures freeze water and form ice. Another sphere of the Earth is the geosphere. The geosphere is made out of rocks and minerals on the surface of the Earth. Another sphere of the Earth is the biosphere. The biosphere is the region of the atmosphere, hydrosphere, and lithosphere that is occupied by living organisms. There are 3 types of heat transfer. They are convection, conduction, and radiation. Conduction is the transfer of energy by contact of particles. An example of conduction is touching the stove and getting burnt. Radiation. Radiation is the transfer of electromagnetic waves. An example of radiation is sitting by the fire and feeling the warmth of the fire. Weather versus climate. Weather is the day-to-day average temperature and precipitation. The climate is the average temperature and precipitation over a long period of time. Air masses. There are 4 different types of air masses. Continental tropical air mass is dry and warm. Maritime tropical. A maritime tropical air mass is wet and dry. Continental polar. A continental polar air mass is dry and cold. Maritime polar. A maritime polar air mass is wet and cold. Fronts. A front is a boundary separating 2 masses of air with different densities. Cold fronts. A cold front is when a cold air mass meets a warm air mass and pushes the warm air mass up above it. Warm front. A warm front is when a warm air mass meets a cold air mass and pushes on it, making the warm air mass go over the cold air mass slowly. Occluded fronts. An occluded front is when a warm air mass gets caught in between two cold air masses. Stationary fronts. A stationary front is when the cold air mass and the warm air mass cannot get past each other and stay stationary. Jet streams. A jet stream is a river of air moving at high speeds near the top of the troposphere. Pressure systems. High pressure air rotates clockwise and is an anticyclone. Low pressure air rotates counterclockwise and is a cyclone. Surface weather map. A surface weather map shows how the atmospheric pressures can vary. Earth's rotation and global winds. The Coriolis effect is a phenomenon. The water cycle. The water on Earth goes through a cycle called the water cycle. The water cycle has 6 stages. Layers of the Earth. The Earth has 4 main layers. Earth's crust. The Earth's crust is the top and the thinnest layer of the Earth. The mantle. The Earth's mantle is the layer below the crust. It is the largest layer of the Earth, taking up 84% of the volume of the Earth. The outer core. The outer core is a fluid layer made out of iron and nickel. The inner core. The inner core is the solid, deepest layer of the Earth. Types of stress. Stress is caused by the continental plates in the Earth's crust pushing and pulling against each other. There are 3 types of stress. Tension, force direction, pulling apart, result crust change, thinner. Landforms created, rift valley, mid-ocean ridge. Plate boundaries, divergent. And any additional information is it's a normal fault. Compression. The force direction is pushing together. The resulting crust change is thicker. Landforms created are mountains and ocean trenches. The plate boundaries are convergent. And additional information is it is a reverse fault. Shearing. The force direction is side by side. The resulting crust change is a shift. Landforms created are Earth's scar. The plate boundaries are transform. The additional information, it is a transform fault. Parts of a fault. There are 3 parts of a fault. They are the fault line, the focus, and the epicenter. To find the epicenter, you have to find the point where all 3 of the circles meet. Types of seismic waves. A seismic wave is an elastic wave in the earth produced by an earthquake. There are 3 types of seismic waves. They're the P wave, the S wave, and the L wave. Alfred Wegener. Alfred Wegener was a meteorologist who was fascinated by the Earth. Harry Hess. Harry Hess was traveling across the ocean in World War II, watching a sonar. When he reached the middle of the ocean, he noticed that the sonar was showing that the floor was higher. John Tuzo Wilson. Wilson combined Wegener's and Hess's theories. Slab pull and ridge push. Slab pull and ridge push are both associated with plate tectonics. Slab pull is the part of the motion of a plate tectonic that is caused by its subduction. Ridge push is a proposed mechanism for plate motion of plate tectonics. The rock cycle. There are 3 different types of rocks. They are igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. The planets in the solar system. The solar system has 8 planets. In order from the sun, They're Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Mercury is a terrestrial planet, meaning it is composed mostly of silicate rocks or metals. Venus is also a terrestrial planet. Earth is also a terrestrial planet. And Mars is a terrestrial planet too. Jupiter is a gas giant planet, meaning it is composed mostly of gases. Saturn is a gas giant planet too. Uranus is an ice giant planet composed mostly of elements such as oxygen and carbon. Neptune is also an ice giant planet. There are two different types of tides that can occur. A spring tide is a tide that is higher than normal tide, and a neap tide is a tide where the difference between high tide and low tide are the least. Solar eclipses. A solar eclipse is when the sun is covered by the moon. A partial solar eclipse. A partial eclipse happens when the Earth moves through the moon's penumbral shadow. Annular solar eclipse. An annular solar eclipse occurs when the moon is further away in its orbit and appears to be too small to completely cover over the sun's disk. Total solar eclipse. A total solar eclipse is when the moon completely covers the solar disk. Hybrid solar eclipse. A hybrid solar eclipse is a very rare type of solar eclipse. It occurs when one part of the Earth sees an annular solar eclipse and another part of the Earth sees a total solar eclipse. Lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse is when the moon passes directly behind Earth and into its shadow. Total lunar eclipse. A total lunar eclipse is when the Earth completely blocks direct sunlight reaching the moon. Partial lunar eclipse. A partial lunar eclipse is when the Earth moves between the sun and the full moon, but they are not precisely aligned. Penumbral lunar eclipse. A penumbral eclipse is when the sun, Earth, and moon are imperfectly aligned. Planetary transits. A planetary transit is when Venus or Mercury crosses across the disk of the sun. Transit of Venus. A transit of Venus is when the disk of Venus passes like a small shadow of the sun. Transit of Mercury. A transit of Mercury is when Mercury passes directly between the sun and our planet. Rotation and revolution. Rotation is when the Earth spins around on its axis every 23 hours and 56 minutes. Revolution is when the Earth goes around the sun every 365 and a fourth days. Seasons. The 4 seasons are caused by the tilt of the Earth's axis. The phases of the moon. There are 8 main phases of the moon. New moon. The new moon is the first lunar phase. Waxing crescent moon. The waxing crescent moon is the second lunar phase. First quarter moon. The first quarter moon is the third lunar phase. Waxing gibbous moon. The waxing gibbous moon is the fourth lunar phase. Full moon. The full moon is the fifth lunar phase. Waning gibbous moon. The waning gibbous moon is the sixth lunar phase. The third quarter moon. The third quarter moon is the seventh lunar phase. Waning crescent moon. The waning crescent moon is the eighth and final lunar phase. Weathering, erosion, and deposition. Weathering is the breaking apart of material either physically or chemically. Erosion is the movement of weathered material. Deposition is the process of dropping off sediments. The cup bank and the point bar. The outside bend of the river where erosion occurs is called a cup bank. The point bar is the inside bend of a river where deposition occurs. An alluvial fan is the deposition on a valley floor that occurs after a river comes off of a hillside. A delta is the deposition of sediment where a river will enter into a lake or an ocean. Immature and mature rivers. An immature river is a river that is fast-moving and moving forward without bending. An oxbow lake. An oxbow lake is a lake that is formed when a mender cuts off and a lake is formed. A levee. A levee is an embankment built to prevent the river from overflowing. A meander. A meander is a bend of a mature river. A swamp/wetland. A swamp or a wetland is an area. That was my 2019 Digital Hiking Journal for Mr. Sable's class. Thank you for watching.